This is the Sci-Fi Griot. In the last episode, we asked whether science fiction is a reflection of who we are or a warning about where we're headed. We looked at optimism, fear, politics, power, and identity. But today I want to take that conversation one step further. Because if science fiction really is warning us about where we're headed, then the real question becomes, are we actually listening? Or are we just watching, nodding, and moving on? One of the strange things about warnings is that they rarely feel urgent until it's too late. A smoke alarm doesn't stop a fire. A warning sign doesn't prevent an accident. It only gives you a chance to respond. Science fiction has been sounding alarms for decades about unchecked power, dehumanization, fear overriding values, and technology outpacing wisdom. But here's the uncomfortable truth: we love science fiction warnings as long as they stay fictional. The moment those warnings start to resemble real life, we call it pessimism or politics or exaggeration. We say, oh, it's just a movie. That would never happen. We're smarter than that now. And then we move on. So here's the thing also about warning: they're not meant to be entertaining, they're meant to disrupt. That's why certain science fiction stories feel heavy, why they linger, why they don't resolve neatly. Stories that ask, what if the system is the problem? What if survival requires moral compromise? What if progress comes with loss? We don't ignore those stories because they're unrealistic. We ignore them because they're too close. Listening would require reflection, and reflection can demand change. Let's return briefly to Star Trek. The Federation represent a future where humanity figured out things, but that future required intentional choices, cooperation over dominance, ethics over efficiency, dialogue over destruction. The danger with optimism is that it can become passive. If we assume progress is inevitable, we stop doing the work required to reach it. Star Trek isn't saying this will happen, it's saying this is possible if you choose it. Optimism without effort becomes denial. Battlestar Galactica shows us what happens when fear drives decision making. Under threat, people give up freedoms. Under threat, people justify cruelty. Under threat, people centralize power. And also under threat, people redefine enemy. The tragedy isn't simply that bad decisions are made, it's that those decisions feel reasonable in the moment. That's the warning. The show asks, how much of your humanity are you willing to trade for survival? And history, real history, shows how easily fear can manipulate people into surrendering values they once claimed were non negotiable. The expanse reminds us that system persists. Technology advances, but power structures adapt. The belt doesn't suffer because people are evil, it suffers because system reward exploitation. That's an important distinction. The warning isn't people are bad. Its system left unchecked will always benefit someone at someone else's expense. If we don't intentionally design fair system, inequality simply scales with technology. Sometimes we ignore warnings not because we're afraid, but because we're convinced we're smarter than the problem. The show Westworld give us a different kind of warning. Not about scarcity, not about survival, but about control without conscience. The park exists because humanity believes it has outgrown morality, that intelligence and innovation justify domination. In Westworld, suffering is normalized because it's contained. Ethics are dismissed because the victim are artificial. Warnings are ignored because profit stays high. And every collapse is preceded by the same assumption. We understand this system well enough to control it. That assumption is the warning. Because the danger isn't the technology, the danger is believing that intelligence replaces accountability. Westworld also asks a question that's easy to avoid. What happens when power is divorced from empathy? And who gets to decide when something deserves moral consideration? That question echoes forward into every system we design. Afrofuturism adds a crucial layer to this conversation. For many marginalized community, science fiction warnings aren't theoretical. They reflect lived experience. Afrofuturism asks who is included when we imagine the future? Who gets protected? Who get erased? Who is expected to adapt rather than be considered? Wakanda represents not just technological advancement, but agency. It says the future should not happen to us. We should help shape it. Listening to warning means expanding who gets a voice in the conversation. So as you step back, you can see the pattern. Star Trek reminds us that the future only works when optimism is matched with effort. Battlestar Galactica warns how quickly fear can make us trade values for survival. The Expanse shows that systems don't break on their own. They evolve to protect power. Westworld exposes the danger of believing control is the same as wisdom. And Afrofuturism insists the future isn't truly a future unless everyone is allowed to shape it. So, different universes, same question: are we listening or just watching? Science fiction often shows us what happens after warnings are dismissed, not through explosion, but through erosion. Trust erodes, institution erode, values erode. Characters look back and say, we should have seen this coming. That line appears again and again. And what's striking is how rarely anyone says, we didn't know. They knew, they just didn't act. Science fiction doesn't portray collapse as sudden, it portrays it as gradual, the result of many small decisions made in the name of convenience, fear, or control. So, one of the greatest defense against listening is entertainment itself. When warnings are packaged beautifully, we can enjoy them without absorbing them. We praise the writing, the visual, the performances, but separate ourselves from the implication. We say, that's a powerful story, instead of asking, what is this story saying about us? Science fiction becomes something when we consume rather than confront, and consumption doesn't require accountability. So, not everyone has the same luxury of ignoring warnings. For some communities, dystopia doesn't feel hypothetical, it feels familiar. When science fiction talks about surveillance, loss of rights, disposable population, unequal protection, some viewers experience that as fiction. Others experience it as recognition. So when we ask, are we listening? We also have to ask, who can afford not to? Perspective shapes urgency, and urgency shapes action. So hearing a warning isn't the same as listening to it. Listening requires discomfort, humility, willingness to change. Science fiction often warns us about ourselves, not about aliens or machines or distant futures. It asks the questions: what do you value when you're afraid? Who do you protect when resources are limited? What are you willing to sacrifice for stability? Those questions don't expire when the credits roll. So science fiction doesn't demand answers, it asks better questions. What kind of future do you want? What are you willing to sacrifice to get there? What values survive when things get hard? Who do you protect when power shifts? Those questions don't belong in space, they belong here with us. At its best, science fiction isn't saying this will happen. It's asking, if this did happen, would you recognize your role in it? That's a harder question than prediction because it removes distance. It replaces responsibilities back in the present. So, as we close, if we aren't listening to the warnings, if we keep treating them as entertainment rather than examination, then the final question becomes unavoidable. Who gets to survive the future that's being imagined? That's where we're going next. This has been the Sci Fi Griot, a place to slow down, to reflect, and to imagine carefully.